and welcome. I'm Julia Manchester, national political reporter at The Hill. Thank you so much for joining us for our program today, Powerful Women Over 50, a program celebrating women 50 and up who are multi-hyphenates, politicians, mothers, entrepreneurs, teachers, and leaders who have broken barriers, shattered stereotypes, and each paved the way in their respective fields. Best of all, many women are still just getting started achieving their greatest success and impact well after that 50th milestone. To the recent naysayers who questioned whether women were past their prime at 50, these powerhouse women say a resounding no. We have an all-star lineup today, but before we get underway, just a reminder that you can join the conversation on social media at The Hill events using the hashtag #TheHillWomen. Now let's kick off our important discussion on how women over 50 are redefining what's possible. My first guest is producer, TV host, and best-selling author Melissa Rivers. I spoke to her just a short while ago. Take a listen. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. Jumping right in, you host a podcast, Melissa Rivers Group Text. What inspired you to start this, and what do you hope people will get from it?
What inspired me to start this? My friends. You know, I have a bunch of different friend groups, and everybody, you know, on our group text talks about different things. And I think that's how it started, was we all have such different views on different things and different topics that hit different groups of our friends. And the one thing they all have in common is they're funny. And it sort of morphed from being topic driven. And then during the pandemic, I was like, oh God, my brain's tired. Everybody else's brains must be tired too. And it really took a turn to be light. And celebrity interviews and, you know, health experts and this expert. And I'm very fortunate that I have spent my life interviewing and being interviewed. So I think it creates a very comfortable dynamic for celebrities. I've known so many people for so long, from the red carpet and all this, that there's an ease and a casualness to the conversations. And because I'm not scared to admit my stuff, you know, I'll be the first one to say, oh my God, this was the most humiliating moment for me. What was your worst, you know, what was your most embarrassing moment? And I think because I put myself out there first, people feel comfortable doing it. And again, it's funny. It's light. It's fun. It's what you would hope the person sitting next to you at a dinner party would be like.
So speaking of funny, your mother, Joan Rivers, was considered a pioneer of women in comedy. How did that trailblazing inspire you, and how do you carry on her legacy?
I think it's really how I look at life. We always look through a funny lens. You know, we have, in our family, we had real gallows humor. And my mom used to say, if you can make someone laugh, you're giving them a mini vacation. And who wants to not give someone a mini vacation? You know, you walk away from something, and you can't hate anyone that you laugh with. You can dislike them, you can disagree with them, but you can't hate them. And I think today that is so important. If you can laugh with someone, you can't hate them.
Same line of thought. You've written 3 books published about your relationship with your mother. What inspired you to share those stories, and what do you hope people will ultimately get from them?
A sense of the closeness, a sense of the fun, especially my last book, Lies My Mother Told Me, which is completely silly and taking some real life events and then multiplying them by 1,000. They're so over the top, and just really having fun with the silliness. And that became, you know, Lies My Mother Told Me started during COVID, and it became a thing with my writing partner and I. We would get on Zoom and just laugh, and it saved us both. I would look forward to our writing sessions. He would look forward to our writing sessions a couple times a week. And for both of us, it became such a pivotal part of our quarantine. That was both of our happy places. And finding out that my son could do laundry. That was a good moment too. Didn't know he had that skill.
Well, there you go. I know a lot of mothers are happy to find that out. You and your mom have been credited with revolutionizing the red carpet. What is your advice to women who want to follow in those footsteps?
Geez, and being on the red carpet.
And being a woman who's a public figure in fashion, any of those arenas, or who want to be in journalism and reporting.
Okay. Yeah, now I know what you mean. As much as, again, this is all in hindsight. Don't be afraid to fail. Which when you're in the moment is the most terrifying thing. And I have to remind myself of that every single day. I think it has, and also, which my mom always said too, is go through any door that opens. It might not be where you want to be going, but go through it. And that's how I ended up on the red carpet. I had, I just shot a pilot for my own TV show, and I had this going and that going. And my mom had already done one, and they came to her and said, would I be interested? And we must have been having a tough day. And apparently she said, I don't know, ask her yourself, because if I ask her, she'll just say no, which is such a mom-daughter moment. And I was like, yeah, okay, I might as well try it. The pilot I had shot didn't get picked up, and I was like, well, fine. And again, it was a door that opened that I never had any inkling that I would walk through. And I did. And I'm glad I did. Who knew? Who knew at the time that this little germ of an idea would turn into destination viewing?
Pivoting a little bit to what you just said, you've touched on this several times in your answers. You've been a mental health advocate for many years. How does this particular issue affect women over 50? And what advice do you have for that specific subset of our population?
Gosh, mental health in women over 50. We have to get away from the idea that we are not allowed to fail. Most women over 50 have something in their lives that they're not happy with, or a decision they made, or not being able to get out of a cycle, whether it be bad relationships or not happy at work. And I think a lot of us, especially who are parents, feel this pressure to be the pillar and the pillar of the family, without even realizing it. And I think, we have to give ourselves permission to be weak. And that's been a big struggle for me. And it was for my mom and my dad. None of us could admit we were ever weak. And that is something I have struggled with my whole life. I still feel like I need to apologize when I feel like I can't do something. And you have to learn to be that it's okay. It's okay to say I'm having a hard time with this. And I think for women over 50, that's the hardest thing to do, because we come from a generation, and, like myself, we're all Gen Xers, where, especially now, we're so busy proving that we're different than millennials and Gen Z, and we're so much stronger. And this, we have to allow ourselves to be like, okay, I'm not as strong as I seem, and not be afraid to be judged by that. I mean, I can just speak for myself that that's a big thing for me.
Sure, and you've got a lot on your plate right now. You've got
Thank
a movie
God.
in development, 2 TV shows, you're working on your next book. How do you do it all, and what is your advice for women who are wanting to do it all like you?
It's interesting, because that's one of the things I always hear on my podcast when I read somebody's introduction, woman or man. We're always shocked by our resumes. because I'll sit here and say, I've not accomplished anything. I have not accomplished enough. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. I'm not this. I'm not that. And I was just interviewing someone the other day, and I read, in the introduction of my podcast, and I read like, they've done this, 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 this. And the person said, well, you make me sound really successful. And I think we all lose sight of that. And I'm the first one to admit, I fight every day feeling judged or that I'm not good enough or any of those things. I hope I get better at that, but I think to say, how do I get through it? I just put my head down and keep going. I think that's the best thing. I always feel like motion creates motion, and being stagnant is the worst possible thing you can do for your mental health, for your physical health, even if it's get out and take a walk.
Right.
You never want to be stagnant. And that's what I make myself do, is not be stagnant in any way, shape, or form. And also allow yourself to have the day when you don't have to do anything. Like I always say, I'm a big, and I say it to my son, and he's the same way. Busy is good, but I'm one of those people who I have to have a plan to do nothing. Like I have to say, okay, today I'm doing nothing because that's my plan. And so it's, however, I would say you have to learn how to play mental hopscotch with yourself.
And I think a lot of people are that way. So that's very good advice, to schedule in some time for yourself as well. What continues to inspire you as things go on post-COVID and as you continue on with your career?
People always say, what inspires you? And I always default to surviving till tomorrow. What inspires me is, people always say, are you going to retire? I'm like, and do what? I think natural curiosity inspires me. I think, again, I'm so fortunate to be able to make a living doing what I love and in my chosen profession. I think that inspires me, is every day going, God, I'm so lucky that someone pays me to do what I do. And I find a lot of inspiration in that. I find a lot of inspiration in my son and seeing him travel through life, and continuously trying to set a good example for him. I don't want to retire. I can't fathom that. So for me, it's always what's next and what's interesting, whether it be a new book idea that's completely out of the box, or developing a TV show that is not at all based in comedy, which is one of the things I'm doing right now. It's very a historical perspective. And I would say exercising the parts of my brain that I don't use every day.
Yeah, and going off of that and talking about your son, you've said that for mothers of young men, it's important to help raise good men. It's quote unquote, it's our responsibility to raise good men. Could you elaborate a little more on that and give some advice to other mothers of young men?
There's been this whole generation, and it's my son's generation, and probably even the ones a little bit younger, have all been about empowering your daughters. Well, we need to make sure that we, as a boy mom, raise men that embrace that. And it's our responsibility to create good men who respect women and do not see a difference between what a man can do and what a woman can do. I got very lucky with my son, especially being a single parent. He was raised by two very strong women. So to him, that's normal. Being around ambitious, strong women is normal to him. It's not scary. It's not intimidating. It's embraced because that's his comfort zone. And I think as a boy mom, it's our responsibility to make this next generation of men really look for that in women and accept it, and a total lack of fear of it, and see that as an attribute in women, and being with someone and choosing to be someone's equal because they want to be, because that's what's interesting to them. And it squarely falls on the responsibility of the parent and especially of the mother of boys.
Well, Melissa Rivers, award-winning host, executive producer, author, you name it, she's done it. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
My next guest is Valerie Jarrett, the Chief Executive Officer of the Obama Foundation. She is the longest-serving senior advisor to United States President in history and is here to discuss her experiences as a woman whose career has included multiple high-level leadership positions. Welcome, Valerie.
Well, thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, Valerie, just to start off with, like I said, you previously served as a senior advisor to President Obama, but I would love to hear what you noticed about women over 50 being in places of power in the workplace.
Well, what I've noticed is by the time you're 50, you've found your voice. You have proven yourself. I think there's a level of comfort and confidence that comes with experience and age. And so it gets better and better. I will say, in contrast to when I first started out, where I didn't feel like it was a level playing field and I didn't feel as though my voice was heard as seriously as perhaps my male counterparts. But with time, it got better.
Yeah, definitely. And we also hear a lot about the importance of having women of color over 50, women of color in general of all ages. But when we talk about the conversation of having women over 50 included in the conversation at the table, I think that certainly extends to women of color, or at least it should. Do you feel that there is enough, women over 50, women of color in the workplace in some of these leadership roles?
No, absolutely not. We still have a long way to go. And I guess I start with the basic premise that diversity is a strength. I think in a global marketplace in which we're all competing for talent, for the human capital, that we want to get as much talent as possible and as much richly diverse perspectives as possible. I think leaders make better decisions if they're not just talking to people who sound like them, think like them, have their same life experiences. And so women and women over 50 and women of color represent a huge percentage of the marketplace. And I think, again, we add a richness to the conversation and the dialogue and improves decision making.
Absolutely. And, you serve on multiple boards. What's the view like for women over 50 from the C-suite?
Well, it's getting better. When I joined my first board 30 years ago, I was either the only or one of two. And now I have the privilege on serving on a board where all of the members of the audit committee are women. That is unprecedented. And there is safety in numbers. I think if you are the only one, whether you're the only woman, you're the only person of color, you tend to feel as though it's harder to be the advocate for issues, not just ones that are unique to yourself, but more broadly. And so my point being that there is safety in numbers. And I do think that as you do get older, the key isn't just to get a seat at the table. The key is to ensure that there are other seats that are joining you at the table. And one of the things I have really tried to do from the C-suite, from the boardroom, is ensure that we're building a pipeline both within the executive suite, the C-suite, but also on the board of talented people that reflect the rich diversity of the marketplace.
It seems that often in the workplace and in our society, younger women or women under 50 and women over 50 are oftentimes pitted against each other. I know you've spoken quite a bit about the importance of mentorship and how that's a two-way street. I would love to hear your thoughts on the importance of allyship between women of different ages in the workplace.
Oh, look, it's really important. When I was a young person in my career, I had an older woman who just, not only was she my mentor, but she was my sponsor, she was my advocate. She told me not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear. She really enabled me to find my voice. And I couldn't have done it just with my peers. I needed somebody who was older and more experienced than I was to guide me through. And the experience that I had with her, that very close bond of relationship that formed, is what really motivated me throughout the rest of my career to try to do the same thing with younger women and to I know what it's like to be in their shoes, and I know what it's like to feel vulnerable and feel kind of lost and not sure that anyone's really looking out for you. And building those relationships with people who are older than you in an organization is really important. And I enjoy it because I learn a lot from the young people. I'm always asking them questions, and they're so much more savvy and worldly in a lot of ways than I could possibly be. And so it is a two-way street. And the fundamentals of it, Julie, is that it's based in a relationship. And I often say, look, your work product, that's table stakes. Everybody assumes you can do the work. What's really important is, are you building relationships founded in trust, which means you have to tell your story. You have to open up. You have to be vulnerable with people so that they will care about you. Nobody goes to bat for somebody just because of their work product, because if you're going to tie your reputation to another human being, you've got to know them. And that means open up and tell your story and ask questions about other people so that you're really forming a relationship.
Right, right. And what is the biggest piece of advice you could give to women under 50 or over 50?
Well, look, that your views matter, and don't be sensitive. I think sometimes I have been in work environments where the decibel of the male voices or their tone had a chilling impact. Or if I'd said something and someone didn't pay attention to me, and then a few minutes later a guy says the same thing, my feelings would be hurt. And I think what I grew to appreciate more as I got older is it's not about me. It's about ensuring that the people who are the decision makers make the best possible decisions. And so whether I am in an operating position or a staff position, my view is to try to be like a sponge, get as much information as possible, and fight for my ideas. And it doesn't mean you win every fight, but at least make sure that you're in the game.
Right.
And
right.
you can't. And the final thing I say, don't put a brick on your own head. I think sometimes the tendency is to get a little intimidated, and there are no dumb questions. You have to get so comfortable in your own skin that you develop an ability to be resilient and advocate for yourself and advocate for others.
Right, right. Well, Valerie Jarrett, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. My next guest is Senator Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee. Senator Blackburn is the first female senator elected from Tennessee. I spoke with her a short time ago. Take a listen.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us today. Just to jump right into it, you were elected to Congress as you were turning 50. What have been some of the biggest lessons you've had or learned in Congress since then and have learned as a woman over 50?
One of the biggest lessons is that you have to make certain that you can do your homework, because I have found that women have to know more. They have to be more prepared. They have to be willing to speak up and create that place for themselves at the table. Because here in Congress, that table is not always going to be there for them. So we have made certain that we do our homework, that we know our issues, that we know our facts, our figures, that they're researched, and that we are always pushing to make certain we have that place at the table.
A lot of women of all ages feel pressure to accomplish various milestones at certain points in their life, whether it's having children, reaching a certain point in their career, maybe checking off some things on a bucket list, whether that's, travels or goals, that kind of a thing. But it seems like this concept of women over 40, women over 50, reinventing themselves or, moving into a different career or doing something new as they get older, that's really starting to be normalized, thankfully. And I just want to know what advice you would have for women to get into a second act.
Right. And I have written quite a bit about this in my books and in speeches that I've given for women. What I have found is that when men start their careers, they look at things as a trajectory. Women, when they move into a career, they take a more circuitous route, if you will, because they will take time off for children and take time off for elderly relatives or to tend to parents. And so they will move maybe from a corporate job to something that is an independent contractor status or a self-employed status and work in that venue. Or maybe they will put their energy into nonprofits and to volunteer work. And then as children grow, they may choose to move back into a part-time or a full-time or a consulting basis status, and then move back into the corporate world. So you do see this more circuitous route. One of the things I think is important to this, and that women should realize, is that all of these skills that they are developing, they're transferable commodities. And when they look at that resume for a second or a third act, they should include those skills that they have developed as they have worked, maybe in the children's school, maybe in their church, maybe in the nonprofit world. Include those as skills acquired and use that to market themselves in a more holistic and a fuller way, recognizing all of these skills that they have developed. In some of my speeches in one of my books, I had talked about meeting a guy at one of these meat and three restaurants on a town square in Tennessee. And Tennessee had never elected a woman in her own right to Congress. And I walked up to the guy. He looked like he had been farming all morning and was stopping for lunch. And I handed him my push card and said, "I'm State Senator Marsha Blackburn. I'm running for the U.S. House. I sure would appreciate having your vote." He nodded. I moved on. And then as I got ready to leave this little cafe, he motioned me back over to his table and he said, "Little lady, what qualifies you for the U.S. House of Representatives?" And I thought a moment, because I thought I might not get this guy's vote. And I said, "Well, sir, I've been the 3-year-old choir director. I've been the room mother chair, and I've been the Girl Scout cookie mom. And if you can handle a class of 3-year-olds, and if you can handle the Girl Scout cookies, you can handle the U.S. House of Representatives." And I think many times we as women discount those skills, and we ought not to.
And that's really interesting that you bring that up, because I see women on both sides of the aisle, mothers, maybe not yet mothers, running for office and talking about their experience being a mom and, being in these different, situations, raising a family. What advice do you have for women at any age, really, looking to get into politics?
And what they should do is make certain that they are participating in the community, that they are building that base of support, that they're allowing people to know them and their philosophy of life, their philosophy of government, and how they would handle situations. One of the things so interesting to me is issues change. And especially in elective office, you're going to have a vast array of issues that come before you in any given week. And policy debates change. They ebb and they flow. But what people do want to know is how you relate to them and how do you line up with the issues that are very important to them, and what path then can they depend on you to travel as you do the due diligence on whatever the issues of the day are going to be.
Senator, what is your advice for women over 50 years old in a nutshell?
They have learned a lot by living. The great Loretta Lynn once said, "Not all learning comes from books. You got to live a little." Put these experiences to work for you.
And what's your personal mission or mantra that drives you every day?
Every day, I think about two things that my parents taught me. One, give back more than you take. And the second, leave things in better shape than you found them.
Senator, just over a month ago, your former colleague, Dianne Feinstein, on the Democratic side of the aisle, passed away, and you called her a trailblazer. I wanted to get your thoughts on what you make of her legacy and what you hope your own legacy might be.
Yes, I think Senator Feinstein had a legacy of supporting women. And after she passed, and I was on the floor paying tribute to her, I talked about how she had approached me when I came to the Senate. And she said, you know, I was the first in California, and this is what I found from breaking those barriers. And this is what I found from being in the Senate. And she knew that I was going to be on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is where she held a seat. And we talked a bit about that. I think her willingness to realize that it is important to open those doors for all women and to ease that path. So, and that's important to do. And it's one of the things that I have sought to do. When you break a barrier, it's important to realize you don't break that barrier just for people in your party. You're breaking that for all women, whether it is the other party, whether it's women who at this point in time have no political inclination. But it's important for women to show that they can work with respect for others, that they can be consensus builders, that they can find solutions to problems. I like to say, I am always willing to have a conversation with anyone who would choose to make the lives of Tennesseans better.
It's absolutely remarkable to see Republican and Democratic women coming together over that shared experience of being a woman. Senator Marsha Blackburn, thank you so much for joining us here today.
I'm delighted to join you. Thank you.
Now for the business perspective. My colleague Ashley Banfield, anchor of Banfield on News Nation, spoke with Angie Hicks, the co-founder and chief customer officer of Angie, an online service provider for home projects. Take a listen.
Angie, it's great to meet you. This is weird, but at least I get to see you and talk to you, which is great. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Ashley. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to be with you. I'm a big fan because I think about your start in 1995 as my start of my American journey as an immigrant. And 1995, there was no online, and you started, the precursor to Angie's List. First of all, how did you even do it not online? And back then, did you have any idea it was going to be what it is today?
Absolutely had no idea that it was going to be what it is today. That is for sure. I was 22 when we started Angie's List. And you're right. When I try to explain to people that we were in a magazine and a call-in service, there was barely email back then. Our very first email address for the company was an AOL address.
Wow, well, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's let's put ourselves back in that time.
You were literally knocking on doors. I can't believe the security risk, because today we just don't even think that's something that's realistic. But B, how would people even respond to someone knocking on doors and asking for something most people would consider a privacy issue? Join my club?
Yeah, exactly. They did not respond well, but maybe they did. So, I think about this back, kind of putting it into perspective. We didn't have a marketing plan. We had based Angie's List off of a business that had been around since the 70s in Indianapolis. And it'd been a little newsletter where you find the best plumber, find the best electrician. And their marketing plan in the 70s was going door to door. So we thought, well, I guess Angie's going to go door to door. And that, I'm an introvert. I'm incredibly shy. So none of that was actually going to work very well. I would spend, and I looked at it as a numbers game. I'm like, I have to knock on so many doors. And if I can get a person or two to join, I feel like I had great success. So during that entire first year, I measured sales by 1 or 2. If I could get 1 or 2 consumers a day to sign up, 2 was a banner day.
Are you still the same, or have you been able to sort of walk in the front door with a little bit more forceful grit?
I think that, experience gives you just more confidence. And, I think when I think of advice to young, women, I think we tend to hold back more than we should. We tend to not give ourselves enough confidence and credit to do things. Experience bought me some of that. So yeah, I can walk into a room and I can have a confidence and be able to say things much more boldly than I used to. But I still practice that, like, hey, I'm going to work right there beside you and we're going to do this together kind of mentality, because I think that's how you create a good culture.
In that same vein, young people often aren't taken as seriously as veterans in business.
Right.
And so, do you recommend employing those same gentle backdoor grit tactics with young people? Or do you still see that there is still an issue with women? They still have to come at things differently in order to be acceptable and not shrill.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a balance of just how you approach things and I remember this was told to me early on. It was like, always know your numbers when you go into a meeting. And if you can't do the math in your head, bring the calculator.
That's like Shark Tank. You hear that all the time on Shark
Right.
Tank.
I mean, it's just things like that where you're just like literally like make sure that you're equipped, that you're not like caught off guard in a meeting, go in ready to have any answer come your way. I mean, and I encourage people to think about that. I mean, you're the subject matter expert. If I'm asking you questions, it's because you know things I don't know, and I want to understand where it's at. I've also learned over the years, one of the things that is super important to kind of making sure the team is effective and people are owning their areas is giving people the space to talk about what they know. I mean, like I've been at the same business for nearly 30 years. I've seen a lot of things. Like there aren't a lot of things that surprise me, right? But like I will intentionally, like you intentionally sometimes have to hold yourself back and be like, you know what, I'm going to let this conversation reach its point and I'm going to step back and let it happen without me interjecting.
Even if the conversation is a time waster, just for just for placating those in the room, or are you genuinely hearing things that if you weren't a good listener, you wouldn't have heard?
I think it's important for two reasons. That your latter point is one of them, is so that you can kind of hear perspectives and you're not kind of caught in your own narrative. But then also it's a learning experience for everyone there. I mean, I always dislike the highest ranking person in the room should be the one that talks the most. Like, no. I think everybody, like there should be someone accountable for each thing. They should be the expert. They should be the ones that know it. And yes, they should be able to be questioned and et cetera, but they have to own it and they should get the same respect in a meeting as anyone else sitting there.
Do you give away decision making in deference to recognition to your employees in that way? Even when hey, we've been to that rodeo before and that isn't going to work. I do have the better solution, but I really want you to feel empowered because it makes a better company culture. Do you ever do that?
I have, and I think partially, because of the long tenure, like circumstances change. Like that decision might result in something different than it did 5 years ago. So you need to not be afraid to retry things. It's kind of don't get caught in this is how we've done them, always done things routine. So it's good to revisit things like that. And I always favor people who are willing and able to make a decision and are willing to, kind of call a shot. I tell all my team members, I was like, I'd rather you make a decision than ask for permission. All I ask is that if something goes wrong, you come and tell me first, because ultimately I'm going to help you kind of figure out how to fix this. And I'd rather do it when it's fresh and there's less that needs fixed, right?
Well, and then own it. Also own it. Don't try to shovel it
it's
off.
like, and it's not a like, oh, I'm ashamed that I made a mistake. People make mistakes every day. I mean, people will ask me, what was your biggest mistake? I was like, I made 3 today. Which one do you want?
What was your biggest mistake if you have to look over the last 20, 30 years?
Oh, I see. I never answer this one well. I mean, I'll come up with various ones. It's like, I think, we started in the Midwest, and we were uncomfortable opening a market in Chicago, because it was, a big city. It was going to be expensive to market there, et cetera. But lo and behold, guess why people open companies in big cities? Because there's lots of people there. So Chicago went gangbusters. Well, and, we probably waited 3 years longer than we should have to open it.
That's your biggest mistake? Wow.
No, that's not. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think
so.
about this. Like, I don't think about these as like, there's always, that's not probably not, that's why I say I don't have a biggest mistake. I have kind of mistakes that are just kind of memorable to me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think about, there are very few people who can go by their first names, right? Like Cher, which is a whole other category. But, Martha and Oprah, these are people like you that have come from their own genesis. And do you ever consider yourself in those ranks? Because they're very big, bold, and very loud. And you, by your own recognition, don't love the spotlight. And yet you're in those ranks, for us who don't know the difference between, a bottom line at a company, that's you. Do you feel that?
I don't see I mean, I guess it's just kind of the process. It's like I kind of was in the limelight because it was right for the business, not because I necessarily wanted to be in the limelight. I'm super excited about what we do and how we help consumers and pros. And I feel like I have had the great honor of being able to interact with our customers. I tell our team this in a way that many people don't get a chance to do. The feedback I get and the kind of the understanding of people is fantastic. And it's probably been one of the biggest enjoyments of the business for me.
Speaking of the business, I don't know if you are ever really into divulging, but it's no secret you went public, and I think was it somewhere around 500 million that Angie's List was acquired for? Is that the right number?
Correct.
That is the right number? I was just ballparking it. I thought it might be higher. I think everybody always wants to know, is that like your lottery ticket? Is that like your payday? And it's just easy street from here on in? Or at this age, and I think you're 50-ish, like somewhere around there.
Just turned 51. Yep.
I don't know about that. So at this age, are you just starting? Or at this age, are you thinking, I just put in a solid 30? I want to take some time for me.
Yeah. I mean, I love the business. I love the industry. And I'm like, I think about all the milestones. So you could kind of say, it's like, hey, maybe when you started advertising nationally, maybe when you went public, maybe when you hit this milestone. I constantly try to rethink and reinvent kind of what my focus is and what I'm interested in. And I really keep, kind of two things make the decision about how content I am and excited I am about what I'm doing. And it is, do I like the people I'm working with? And am I learning new things and able to kind of experience new things? And if I can say yes to those, I'm in. And I think, kind of Angie has a lot of opportunity ahead of ourselves. I mean, it's really, the home services industry is the last industry that really is going to transform into this kind of, I'm going to click and my plumber's going to be here and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to have that headache of the water heater not working today. And, and I think we are well positioned to own that. And, as we were kind of last fall embarking on, hey, we're going to spend a lot of time thinking about customer experience. I turned 50. Seemed like a nice time for me to think about how am I going to kind of refocus my time inside the organization. I was like, I'm going to spend a good portion of my time actually talking to the customers directly.
And that's your title, Chief Customer Officer.
Yeah, it's Chief Customer Officer. But usually Chief Customer Officers spend a lot of time looking at data and kind of talking about trends and things like that. I'm actually just talking to the customers. Well, and it's a magical tool. It's a magical tool.
You can design this job any way you want. You're Angie, right?
And it's fun. Like I literally, because they have the opportunity, they can come and talk about whatever they want. And it's the opportunity to do that just helps everything get done even better inside the organization, right? Because the customer knows, like, hey, if I need to, I'll just go talk to Angie about it.
So can I just picture you with like headsets on?
Yeah.
I'm calling the company. Can I talk to Angie?
Yeah.
Do you seriously just pick up the phone?
Well, no, they'll schedule time with me. So so a lot of times it's talking to pros, and they'll just they'll schedule time. And we'll talk about whatever. We'll talk about how they started their business. We'll talk about how Angie's working for them. We'll talk about suggestions they have. And then I'll take that content and take it back to the team and see how we can iterate on it.
So you're still pretty passionate about this. I mean, this is your calling, it sounds like. Yeah. You're not looking to say, hey, I could use some time in Portugal and, backpack in Nepal. I don't know what you're doing.
I think it's we're back to that grit and kind of like, I just enjoy what I do.
So one other question I want to ask, and it's frustrating because men don't get asked this question a lot, but because I personally have felt it and I've struggled with it, it's family.
Yeah.
Family is so tough to juggle for women, not so tough to juggle for men. And I don't know how much that has changed over the last 35 years that I've been in business. How about your read on your odyssey, juggling family and being you?
Yeah. I think it comes down to making choice. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life choice. And you have to make those hard choices. I got advice early in my career, before I was married, before I had kids. And, my colleague told me, look, no one's going to make your family a priority. Only you can do that. And that didn't really mean that much to me at the time. But then as I, got married, had kids, all of a sudden that made a lot of sense. Because no matter how great your bosses or your colleagues are, they're not going to be there saying, hey, aren't you supposed to be at your daughter's violin concert tonight? But you have to make those choices. And I'm very disciplined. So like my husband and I had an agreement. If I was not traveling, I was at home by 6 o'clock every night for dinner. Dinner could be a lot of things. We did a lot of crock pot meals because I could put them in the crock pot before I left. Could be carry out. But we sat down as a family and had dinner together. Didn't mean I wasn't, logging on potentially later, but those were the important choices. We were on the IPO roadshow, and it was my daughter's birthday, the first weekend of it. So I made sure I got home. My colleagues went to a meeting locally, an investor meeting locally, and I hosted my daughter's birthday party. Like, you have to make those choices. And I am like the queen of day trips. I go on 6 a.m. flights, but I'm home at night because I want to make sure that I minimize the amount of time away. So it's making those choices to make sure you're there for the moments that are important.
It's really impressive. It makes me, all while you're saying that, I was thinking about the expression that nice guys finish last. And I think you're sort of the embodiment of nice guys, gals finishing first. Angie Hicks, thank you so much. By the way, I didn't even get to ask you the question that everybody, I think, asks all the time. Why is it just Angie now? And there's a whole reason. It incorporates, putting a lot of different brands all together in home services and just streamlining it. So
and giving it a fresh look, so it wasn't just a list, right? It's like we can do a lot more for you to help take care of your home.
I still don't understand why you dropped the E off it, though. That's the question I had. Why is it Angie with an I? Seriously,
trendier with an I. So now I get people that say, "Oh, I've been spelling your name wrong."
Listen, thank you for this. It's really great to meet you like this. And I'm telling you, I cannot wait for the phone call that I send your way and you pick up on headsets thinking I'm a customer. Thanks, Angie.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashley. It was great seeing you.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks again to Angie Hicks, co-founder of Angie, and to Ashley Banfield for their insights. The education sector is also an important one to cover, since 77% of public elementary and secondary school teachers identified as female in a 2022 study done by the Department of Education. Last week, I was able to speak to Randy Weingarten, who has been the president of the American Federation of Teachers since 2008.
Randy, many of our viewers and many Americans know about, how you've been at the forefront of pushing to strengthen education here in the U.S. But how did education become such an important issue for you?
So it's been important my entire life. My mother was a school teacher. My sister and I went to public schools in Clarkstown, New York, which is about 20 miles up from New York City, and it gave us our opportunities. Theater, stage crew, debate, AP Gov, trying to figure out, how to deal with AP Calculus, which I miserably failed in, but even that kind of struggle, the being able to really try to struggle through and dream and have those relationships and be able to go to a state school, the Cornell School of Labor Relations, for college, fighting, frankly, against budget cuts in the 70s, and many of my friends, my mother being on strike when I was a kid. A lot of these issues, you just started understanding, at least I started understanding, the way in which you could create pluralism and people could be together and be in relationship with each other and not always agree on everything, but you could get that kind of education that was really necessary for all kids. I was pretty lucky. And so it really starts from, the opportunities I had. And I am fierce about everyone should have the opportunities I had. Last thing I'll say is I watched in my own teaching, we had to scavenge for chalk. I feel like I taught in the last century. We had to scavenge for chalk. Our books sometimes in history, and I taught in the 1990s, didn't have Bill Clinton as president. They had, and when you think about that, every morning I would stop at the coffee shop to get a cup of coffee and a muffin. And during that period of time, would stop at the photocopy shop so that I could photocopy my lessons. No kid should be expected to not learn in 21st century schools. We need to give all kids the opportunity to learn. And that's what public schools are supposed to do. Are they perfect? Not at all. Are there lots of things we need to do right now? Of course. But infrastructure wise, they are the opportunity the United States gives our kids to dream their dreams and achieve them.
Yeah, and on that issue of public schools and just education broadly, we know that, this is an issue that's obviously been very much a part of the political discourse on both sides of the aisle. We hear a lot of the Republicans in that talking about it. President Biden and the First Lady, a teacher herself, obviously talk about this. But when it comes to public education, how would you rate the state of public education here in the U.S.?
So if you actually asked parents about their local schools, they'd have pretty strong, good, positive views about it. If you ask people nationally what they think, it's it's middling. So it's like Congress. The closer you get to where the real action is, meaning schools themselves, the more people love their schools. 90% of kids go to public schools. Overwhelmingly, the polls are in favor of having public schools. This last year, we asked people, we said, if you could only have one choice, whether you wanted more choices or you wanted to strengthen your kids' public schools, what would they be? By 80 to 20, they wanted to strengthen their kids' public schools. Now, I think all of this noise has created a lot of distrust, and the further away you are from school, the more distrust there is. And I think we have an obligation not only to lift up, who teachers are and what they do and give them the freedom to teach and kids the freedom to learn, but there's a lot of stuff that we have to do, which is why we've done this Real Solutions campaign. We should be doing a whole lot more experiential learning, not testing, but experiential learning. And in this moment of AI, application of learning is actually more important than memorization. And the same in terms of the jobs of today and tomorrow. We should be doing a lot more to address loneliness and have a safe and welcoming environment for all kids. And dealing with social media issues and frankly the devastating effects that social media has had on kids and making them more lonely. And that's something that parents and teachers could do together. We should be doing a lot more about literacy. So practical skills, literacy, dealing with loneliness, dealing with learning loss. We have to deal with this in schools. Schools are centers of community. And I think if we spent a lot more time talking in this way, which is really apolitical, but really centered on kids' needs, you'd see a lot more support across the ideological spectrum because schools matter and kids matter.
And on AI and social media, these are two issues or two platforms that, can obviously that they have a presence in the classroom, but a lot of times they manifest or take place at home. You hear obviously students on social media from their houses. And then, of course, you hear about AI and how AI is starting to integrate itself into everyday life. How can parents and teachers and students sort of navigate this new world of looking at the positives of social media and AI, while at the same time recognizing some of the threats they may pose to education?
So we need to learn from the mistakes that were made when tech started and social media started, and correct for them when we're talking about generative AI. And what I mean by that is social media companies have no regulation, virtually no regulation whatsoever. The immunity statutes essentially give them free rein. That doesn't happen in Europe. And frankly, California tried to stop this, and the companies went to court to say that they had a First Amendment right to do what they were doing. They don't have a First Amendment right to impair the safety and welfare of our kids. And that's really what we need to do. And that's what these new statutes, COPA and some of these others, are intended to do if they get passed. But in English, this is what it means. Why do the companies not have an automatic default on any machine that's the biggest, the most important, the best safety measure? Why is the default against student safety, not in favor of student safety? Why don't we stop notifications at night for kids so that a parent doesn't have to wonder whether her kid got her computer or her social media at 11 o'clock at night when she should be sleeping? Why don't we have a hotline that goes from a school to these social media companies so that they don't have to wait and wade through hours and hours of time if there's a cyberbullying event? So these are like three things that all these companies could do immediately, and they don't, because they put their profits above kids. And so that's the thing that we can join together. Nobody's stopping social media, but we need to actually stop the addiction and put parents and kids back in charge of it, not the technology company.
Moving on to your role in labor, I mean, we can just turn on the news and see that labor is front and center, whether it's in the automobile industry, the entertainment industry, education. And we've seen the strength of unions really over the past couple of years, well, for longer than a couple of years, but recently in the news cycle. But still, there are efforts to politically take on unions, to dismantle them. As a labor union, what keeps you going in the face of that?
So look, it's the same question as before. What keeps me going is that I get every single day, and I've been doing this work. I've been a union president for 25 years. That's a long time. Every day, I get to work for people who are trying to help educate the next generation of kids from pre-K through college. And I get to work to help advance people's economic livelihood, to help them get a better wage, to help them have decent healthcare benefits, to help them live the American dream. So these two things that I work in, the labor movement and education, it's about the foundations for the American dream. And that's what they're supposed to be. Again, are they perfect? No. But I've never seen people say, well, if a banker hasn't worked well, the whole banking industry should go bye-bye. If a school doesn't work well, all schools should go bye-bye. These are things that give people, working people and their kids, agency and some power. And that's what they want. And that's what I love to do. I'm so honored to be able to be a social studies teacher and a lawyer from, who had parents who were an educator and an engineer. And I get to every single day try to help people have a better life.
And over the past couple of years, you've faced some criticism, and your critics are rather loud and persistent. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that very public criticism?
So first, if it was on the level, it would be different. But what we know about it is an intention to undermine the very institutions that help educate kids, protect democracy and pluralism in this country, and help people have a better shot at the American dream. And so all of us do stupid things. And, I've done stupid things and I've made misjudgments. But how do you actually take someone who from April 2020 tried to reopen schools because we knew it was important, but said they have to be reopened safely so we protect everyone, just like we try to protect everyone from, gun violence, from respiratory issues. How do you lie about me like that? And so what I learned was they'll smear because they're trying to divide and create mistrust and distrust. And we just have to be happy warriors about doing the right things for kids. Does it bother me sometimes? Of course it bothers me. But at the end of the day, I have amazing members. And what's happened is we can't, if I let them bully me, what about every educator? What about every worker? What about every vulnerable student? And the other thing I've come to learn is if you're a member of a minority group, look, there's lots of anti-Semitism. I happen to be married to a rabbi, and I happen to really believe in my faith. And there's a lot of homophobia. And I happen to be the first out lesbian as a labor leader in the country ever. And so this kind of attack of identity, that's all rolled into it too. You notice I talk about that second, because at the end of the day, these entities, public education and the labor movement, that is how we help lift all boats, how we help lift people. And I'm really glad and honored that I get to do this and that my members have voted for me for all these years.
And on that note, you're also a member of the DNC and you're politically active, obviously. Talk about why it's so important to have women involved in politics and have also other identities, whether they're Jewish, LGBTQ+. Why is it so important to have this broad umbrella when it comes to political activity?
Diversity, and de Tocqueville, look, remember, I'm a social studies teacher, so of course I'm going to use some factual or some theorist or some social studies factoid. But de Tocqueville, in his observation of America from the 1700s, saw our diversity as a strength. What diversity does is it brings lots of different voices and ideas to the table, and it creates a sense that we are a big tent. I mean, if you think about Isaiah from Faith, how do we enlarge the tent? How do we make sure that we are really hearing and seeing all? And that's why I think the DNC has made a commitment, the Democratic National Committee has made a commitment to actually seeing all voices and hearing all voices. Having said that, let me just say this. Politics is not an end. There are lots of people who believe that power is an end to itself. I do not. Politics is a mean to a policy end, to making schools better, to making sure that we have the wherewithal to help meet the needs of kids, to making sure we have the labs in a high school so we can do the kind of career connectedness we need to do, like these kind of safe rooms that I've seen Micron do in the microchip industry, that we have, debate clubs and things like that. You need to have lower class sizes. You need to have good schools. You need to have computers. You need to, have feeding programs. All of this costs money. Politics is a means to get that to the people who need it. It's not an end, it's a means.
Well, Randi Weingarten, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm now joined by media entrepreneur Leslie Jane Seymour. She was previously a senior editor of Vogue and editor-in-chief of many women's magazines, including YM, Marie Claire, Redbook, and more. She is now an entrepreneur and has now opened her own media company, Covey Club, and hosts a podcast called Reinvent Yourself. Leslie Jane Seymour, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here, as always.
Well, thanks so much for, taking the time. I was reading your story and how you started Covey Club back in 2017. You say once your children had essentially grown up, left the nest, and you left your job at your publisher, you sort of felt a little isolated from, what your world had been. And I just wanted to hear more about that story and what advice you have for other women over 50 who want to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, as they say, reinvention is not for sissies. And it's also not something to do alone. I had no choice to do it alone. I was in my 50s and I had no idea how to reinvent myself. My magazine went out of business. Who would have thought publishing would end in any way, shape, or form? And I knew that I didn't want to go run another magazine. And so I thought, let me continue to do what I love to do, which is help women who are 40 plus actually create change in their lives. So the idea was, how do you continue to do this? Luckily for us, we're in the digital age. And so I'm able to open up something that does the exact same thing. It's just that we're doing it live. So it's Covey Club is a live platform where we actually take women through. We say we hold a space for you while you figure out what's next. And we're off to the races. It's been fascinating to learn to be an entrepreneur now I'm in my 60s. And it's, every day I learn. I think that's what keeps you young is if you don't make mistakes and you're not laughing at yourself, like just earlier when my ring light's falling over, that's what it's all about. You've got to start at the bottom. You've got to start all over. You cannot be ashamed to laugh at yourself. And, that's what keeps us vibrant and going.
And you talked about how Covey Club is a digital platform. Publishing has gone in a very different direction, I don't think a lot of us would have predicted. But with a magazine like More, which was geared towards women 40 and over, that was a real outlet for women to connect with other women, to hear stories from other women authors who were facing the same experiences. Covey Club is obviously this outlet now on the digital platform, but what are some other good ways to reach women 40 plus, 50 plus who may not feel like they have that sense of community in the media right now?
It's tough. I think it's podcasts. I think it's, I can't say that I think social media does such a great job because it's kind of one way. You can reach people, you can get a comment here or there. Can you get a real sense of warmth and connection? I don't know. There are an awful lot of groups like Covey Club out there who are trying to create real connections, either live or digitally. And I think you have to find the one that actually works for you. There is no one place anymore. I mean, that was the uniqueness of what More did. More spoke to a group of women, 40, 50, 60, who had no home before. So I think now we're kind of on our own, finding our own things. I mean, one of my big issues is, I've always been a fashion girl. I love fashion. Where do I go look for fashion now? There's no place to really look. When I look at the big fashion magazines, they're showing my daughter in $4,000 outfits. It doesn't make any sense. So it's tough. You have to find the people. It's kind of individualistic now. You've got to find the people that speak to you, find the groups that speak to you. I mean, go online and search. I hate to say it. That's kind of, it's all broken up. It's like what's happened to all media, right?
Yeah. And the point you make about fashion just baffles me because my mom raids my closet. I raid her closet. We both shop at Lululemon, J. Crew, whatever. But it seems like this is constantly geared towards young women. I mean, how do some of these corporations in the fashion world, makeup industry, other industries really, how do we get them to understand the value of marketing towards women who are 40 40 plus?
Well, this was why, the reason why More Magazine went out of business is because they didn't fundamentally understand. They were stuck in a 1970s idea that if you're 40 plus or older, younger women aren't interested in you or interested in interacting with you and want to look different from you. As you say, we're sharing the same closets. I've been sharing my closet with my daughter since she was 14. She's been in there stealing my stuff. It's been a source of friction forever. She's now in Boston. She's 28 years old, and I go up to her apartment. I open the door and I see my history. It's all my clothes. They're in there. Nobody really understands. We have totally become a very different merged world where I take cues. My daughter dresses me half the time. She goes into my closet, she pulls out things I already have, mixes them up, and that's how I know what to wear sometimes. It is not segregated. When I first started at More Magazine, my good friend Michael Kors sat me down. This was right in the middle of the recession. And he said to me, you know, I can't advertise to older women because it's older women who are keeping my stores open, but the young women won't come in if I do that. Fundamental misreading of where we are generationally and how women today interact with their daughters.
And it's ironic to me because we talk about mothers and daughters sharing their closets, sharing makeup, obviously as daughters get older, same thing with sons, but from the female perspective, as daughters get older, that relationship with their mother turns into more of a friendship in many ways. But it still seems like the powers that be, whether it's corporations or, politicians, whatever, there seems to be this sort of pitting women against each other in the workplace and in the media, women of different ages against each other. Do you see that happening?
This is so old, and I'm going to say to every single woman, I don't care what age you are listening today, stop. We don't need to fight with each other. The whole point, think about it as distraction. You know how it works in politics. You throw the shiny object over there, people run after it and fight over that. Meanwhile, the people up here, they keep doing what they're doing. The patriarchy has done such a fabulous job of keeping women distracted. They've said, okay, we're going to give you one seat at the table and you're going to argue over that. Meanwhile, they just keep being the patriarchy and taking over the top ranks of everything. That's really smart. Women are smarter than that. And now that we've had COVID, I have to say, I think this is our moment. The old triangle, military triangle that was created back in the 50s for corporate, it was all created after a military thing, which was, this military hierarchy, and you work your way up and people approve you and you get to the top. That doesn't work for women at all. It has never worked for women. Post-COVID, with this whole idea that we're going to do hybrid, we're going to be in, we're going to be out. I think we should look at flattening that triangle and trying to come up with something that is better for women and men. Young men don't want to not see their families either. When I was starting out in business, there were men on Wall Street who were proud of the fact that they were working when their babies were born. I don't think that our son's generation want to do that. That's not what they see. It is the moment now where we can actually change this. I don't know what the answer is, but there are plenty of people doing a lot of studies about it, and I think women will be the change for that. So let's stop. None of us should be fighting with each other. We should see each other as sisters, help each other, and literally, every time we fight with each other, somebody else wins, and it's not a woman.
It's so true. It's so true. So in terms of your advice for women over 50, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give a woman over 40 or over 50?
It's all up here, mindset. The whole thing, I have interviewed 250 women who have made dramatic changes in their lives. They have made changes because of health issues, widowhood, divorce, empty nest, losing a job, being demoted, being absorbed, whatever. The ones who come out on top have a positive, open mindset. They are thinking about what's next. They're constantly curious. They're curious about the world that's out there.
They want to know, what can I do next? How can I still contribute? And they don't listen to anybody who says you're too old, go away. So it's all up here. Keep your mind open. Realize age gives you wisdom. It gives you, the wonderful part is I don't worry about all the things I worried about in my 20s. If I could go back to my 20-year-old self and say, don't worry about all those mean looks those girls in the Vogue copywriter room give you, because it means nothing. Whereas, day in and day out, I was losing sleep over somebody said something bad to me or they looked at my clothes the wrong way. It's all garbage. We are at the point now where, ignore that. You have so much to give, so much to offer. Focus on that. And do not be distracted by stuff that we know that is not important. That is the wonderful, wisdom is a fabulous thing. Be Gaia. Be the earth goddess who knows so much more of this and can help also guide younger women as well into the spots where we need them. We need them as allies. Younger women and older women, we share a lot. Younger women say that they are discarded and put to silence because they're too young and they don't have the experience. Older women are told, you're too old, you're not technically savvy, go away, blah, blah, blah. We share this bridge. Use the bridge. Get to know each other, team up, and let's bust that whole thing open.
You talk about how age gives you wisdom, and that's so incredibly powerful because it seems like in our culture, in our society, age is seen as a negative thing. We want youth. We want to look younger. We want to act younger. But it seems like with women like you, Leslie, and this year alone, we've seen so many women over 40, over 50, Michelle Yeoh, Nikki Haley, Jamie Lee Curtis. They've all broken these barriers and have, shown that they can reinvent themselves or have, a second or third act. I mean, what would you say to younger women who have sort of fallen into this trap of being afraid to get old?
Age is not a disease. This is what I've been saying too. We used to say it more all the time. You can't outrun it. You can do things to make yourself look great, but you are going to age. It's just, you can't stop it. And it happens to everybody. No matter what you do, you are going to age. So you may as well accept it. You may as well enjoy it, and you may as well learn how to make the most of it. And we're on this path. It's a journey. Every single decade is different. And I mean, I've never been happier. And I think you hear that from a lot of women who are older because they know how to get rid of the noise. They know what matters. They know what counts. And if you can't make it, we have a lot of pressure on younger women today. Like at 30 years old, you have to be running for president. You have to have discovered the cure for cancer. All this stuff. And if you're haven't done this by 30, your history, you're over. Baloney. A lot of great things happen between 30, 40, 50, 60. And I know people who've written their first novel at 67. And it's done really well. And that's something they never thought they would do. So there's a whole world of things that are coming to you. There's a whole constantly changing kaleidoscope of opportunities. But again, it all goes back to how do we think about it in here? And how do we make sure that we are constantly staying up with what's going on? Don't back away. Be involved. Upskill, know what's going on around you. If you have kids around you, get them to teach you what's new and what's happening. That will keep you young as well. But it's a long lifetime of learning. And if you are curious, you will always have a joyful life because curiosity is one of the big kickers for staying young at heart and constantly learning.
Finally, Leslie, what's your own personal mantra, mission, or manifesto?
Well, I say, because, I've lost jobs. I've been fired from jobs. I've had magazines close on me, everything. I say, my mantra and Covey Club mantra is it ain't over till you say it's over. And that's because it doesn't matter what other people give to you to let you do what you want to do. It's really about what you want to do and finding the proper outlets for it. For instance, When my magazine closed, it was devastating when more closed. It was devastating to those 1.5 million readers. I could have walked away and never, I could have sat on a beach somewhere and played cards or whatever. But I said, I don't want to do that. That's not who I am. I have spent my whole life teaching women, guiding women, giving them information, helping them have a voice. How do I do that next? I found a new technology.
Well, we're so grateful you did, Leslie, because you're inspiring so many women, not just women over 40, but women under 40 as well. Leslie Jane Seymour, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Our final guest is best-selling author Patricia Cornwell. She is joined by my colleague Elizabeth Vargas, anchor of News Nation's Elizabeth Vargas Reports. Elizabeth, over to you.
Patricia Cornwell, you started your career as a journalist. You ended up working in a morgue. Okay, how did that happen?
I needed to do research. I decided I was going to write crime novels after being a police reporter and doing a biography. And when I was a crime reporter, no one would ever tell me what happened to the body after it left the scene. And I became insanely curious about that. So I got an interview with a medical examiner in Richmond, Virginia, Dr. Marcella Fierro, and she showed me around. Mm-hmm. And the thing that clinched it wasn't the morgue itself, because it wasn't all that interesting, and autopsies haven't changed that much over the centuries, really. But I said, what's new? What's coming down the track? And she said, well, there's two things. One is something called DNA. And the other is using lasers to look for trace evidence, sort of science. And I thought, wow, I want to learn about this. So slowly but surely, I got a job there. I thought it'd be quick. In a year, I'd write a best-selling novel and I could say goodbye to that place. Well, it didn't work that way.
How did it work?
6 years later, I finally left a full-time job. And 4 books. The first 3 nobody wanted. Then I wrote Postmortem, and nobody wanted that at first. And then Scribner's barely took it. And then it went on to win all these awards and everything, and things changed.
And there your career was launched.
What I always tell people, don't give up.
Yeah. I'm curious, the first 3 books did not center on your main character, Kay Scarpetta. And it was a tip from an agent. Tell me how that happened, that made you switch.
Yes, God bless this
main character.
And she's not around anymore, Sarah Ann Freed, the editor, who I never even met, still to this day. And like I said, she's not around anymore. But she was the editor, the Mysterious Press, and she rejected the first one, then the second one, then the third one. So 3 years have gone by. And she was kind.
Did they ever tell you why they were rejecting
I don't
them,
even
or just
remember
no
why,
thanks?
but she said nice things. I sort of knew, but she at least treated me like a human. Okay, so I returned the favor by violating her boundaries and calling her on the phone. And I got the directory assistant to tell me the number for the Mysterious Press in New York City, my little, in Richmond, Virginia. And I get her on the phone and I say, I'm so sorry. This is so and so, and I know I'm not supposed to do this. I said, but please tell me, should I quit? And she said, no, I don't think you should quit. And I said, well, then what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And she said, well, your best character is this woman medical examiner who's a minor character. Your main character is a dud. And your plots, is this what you see in the morgue? Because I was writing about buried treasure and cheated wills and Agatha Christie-ish kind of.
Yeah.
With 20-page autopsies thrown in the middle of all that. No wonder nobody wanted it. I said, no, it's not what I see in the morgue. What I see in the morgue is so horrible, I don't really want to talk about it. She said, yeah, but that's what I want to know about.
Wow.
If you're there, show us.
Write what you know.
So I did. And I wrote Postmortem. And here's the irony. She saw Postmortem, but she thought it was a rewrite of one of my other books, so she didn't read it. So she didn't take it, which actually turned out probably for the best for me, but because Scribner's turned out to be a good home. But yeah, it was pretty desperate times.
Did you ever think about giving up?
No, I thought about killing myself a few times.
Oh, come on.
I'm not kidding.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I did, because I thought I was a failure. I'm not kidding. After my 3rd book was rejected, I told Dr. Fierro, I said, I feel like jumping off a bridge right now. Mm-hmm. And it was like, but if I do, I know they'll pass my pictures around. Everybody will make fun of me, so I guess I better not. But I felt pretty bad. I felt, everything I'd ever wanted to do in life, I'd failed at. I wanted to be a professional tennis player. It became pretty clear that wasn't going to happen. And then in school, I wasn't good at a lot of things. I wasn't good in math. I wasn't good in science, mostly math. I wasn't in chemistry. I couldn't do any of that. And I didn't want to be a lawyer because I didn't want to be like my father. And the only thing I could do was write. And so when I kept getting books rejected, I thought, you're just a failure, just like you've always been. Maybe you should just die. And I didn't, but I was very depressed, and I had an eating disorder at that time. And I can say all this now because I'd like to tell people, no matter how bad you've ever felt, I've felt just probably almost as bad, maybe just as bad, and don't give up, because you never know. If you're willing to keep trying, something special may land on your shoulder, and maybe it didn't earlier because it wasn't ready for you yet, or you weren't ready for it. Mm-hmm. What the powers to be in the universe said to me was, you're going to have to work in this morgue a whole lot longer before you're ready to take on this lady's lab coat.
Yeah.
And furthermore, you can't ever stop learning.
I find it so interesting that the inspiration for your enormous literary success was a woman, this doctor in the morgue, and that the person who gave you the tip that made you see it from a different angle and choose a lead female character was also a woman.
Yes.
So two very powerful women, one in the literary world and one in the basement morgue, had enormous impacts on your life.
Always, and that's been true my whole life, the most influential people, and no disparagement towards wonderful men, because I've had so many wonderful influences there too, but truth be told, Ruth Graham when I was a kid, Marcella Fierro when I started doing this research, the editor, Sarah Ann Freed, who gave me that kind advice and stopped me from quitting. These people, maybe because they've all been in the trenches themselves, they said, you know what, kiddo, come on, just keep doing it. You just don't give up yet.
Explain the Ruth Graham story, because
Well,
she
Graham,
was the wife of Billy Graham.
Right, and I grew up down the road from them in a little town in North Carolina, and Ruth befriended me at a very bad time in my life when I dropped out of school. When I had this eating disorder, I had to go in a hospital for a while, and I dropped out of college.
Were you anorexic?
Anorexia and bulimia, and I was down to 89 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And that's 30 pounds less than I weigh right now, and I was literally, it was really bad. And I came out of that hospital, and I was no better than when I'd gone in it. Nothing would help me, and I was humiliated, felt like a total loser. And Ruth Graham sought me out, and she invited me to have lunch with her because she was a neighbor. And I thought, my goodness, why does someone like that give any care about someone like me? But and the first time we went to lunch, I was riding in her Volvo, sitting in the front seat next to her, and she puts this journal, this beautiful burgundy leather journal in my lap. And she'd just come back from Switzerland, and she was a big journal person. And she bought this journal. She said, I want you to have this. She said, you need to write. She said, I've read some of your poetry, and you need to write. That's what you should do. So here, start
Was she
writing.
the first person who gave you that idea, who planted that seed?
I had teachers that said that I was good at it, but she was the one who said I should do it. And she wanted me to write an article about, okay, I'll be honest about it. Her father was the editor of Christianity Today, this religious magazine. And she said, I want you to write an article for the magazine about how you got better from all this. And I borrowed a neighbor's typewriter and worked on it day after day after day. Then one day I called her, Ruth, and said, I need to tell you something. Can I come up? I went up to the mountain and I said, I can't write this because I'm not better. It's not true, and I'm not going to do it. And I thought she'd be angry. And she said, you know what? That's fine. Just do whatever you need to do. But she never judged me.
Wow. So what advice would you give to women as they approach the 50-year mark or who are over 50 and who may be wondering what their place is in the world, in a culture and a society that often values, especially for women, youth and beauty over age and experience? What would you say?
I would always say, first of all, keep looking up. Just think of yourself as a big antenna dish like a morning glory and have the dish facing up and ask for, why am I here? I know I'm here for a reason, and let me be what I need to be, and it's never too late to start with that.
It never is.
Never. And don't take getting older sitting down. No matter how we can do, our appearance may change a lot, but we can still be strong and vital, and don't ever stop until you have no choice. Just don't.
Patricia Cornwell, so wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much.
It's so wonderful to talk to you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Patricia. That brings us to the end of our program. A big thank you to all of our inspiring guests for taking the time to speak with us, and to you for watching. For those of you who missed any of the conversations this afternoon, you can check out the rest of the program on our website, thehill.com. I'm Julia Manchester. Have a great rest of your day.